Mr. Maturana interview, take one.
I feel very, very honored that I'm here with Humberto Maturana and Sebastian. And I have a chance to be here and talk with you. We've just started our conversation around some of the issues and some of the challenging issues in the world. And the reason why I also particularly enjoy to speak with you is that I believe we are at a point where the world needs what I call a systems view of life. So once we kind of have more and more people who think of the process of life as a vast, interconnected, complex interaction, I don't know, to describe it in a nutshell, then it would change the way we operate in the world. It would change the way we operate as human beings in our environmental context, and it would probably change the way we operate with other human beings. So at this moment, Humberto, I would like to ask you, if you look back to the last 30 years, in the thinking in the world, based on all the theories that you have developed, where do you see advancements in the evolutionary consciousness of humankind?
What has been interesting is what has happened in these last 17 or 18 years, in which the fundamental question has arisen about what is indeed what begins with the origin of living systems. What is it? Is living systems or the whole ecological situation in which living systems exist? And the way this is here, although we are developing with Jimena this notion in the last 3 years, I would say. But how come that you are here? Why are you here?
I'm here because I was invited by Action to give a speech tomorrow morning on the art of collaboration, or the art of leading collectively, which is something that I've developed in my life a lot. I've worked in the last 20 years with a lot of multi-stakeholder projects. I call them interesting collaboration ecosystems, because they become entities, when people collaborate on a large scale for sustainable supply chains or for overcoming water scarcity. The example I've just mentioned about Tunisia, etc. People start from being aware of their own self and maybe the next, kind of the next neighboring persons or the next business context, etc. They become more and more aware of that they are part of what I call a collaboration ecosystem. And I've accompanied in many of such gradually growing collaboration ecosystems, because it turned out that many of the challenges that we have in the world, from water scarcity to climate change to responsible supply chains to children's labor to whatever, improving school systems, etc., actually require not singular actions and linear plans, but they require people to become aware of a change system that they are part of. And the moment that identity grows, of these change systems, people really are able to make a change. They have an impact. And why I was so interested, because parallel to that, I had many deep dives in living system theory, from Humberto Maturana to Petra Künkel to Christopher Alexander to, many different, the red thread through the different perspectives. And what came clear to me is that if more and more people understand how such multi-stakeholder collaboration works, it is almost like, in system theory, you would probably say a fractal of how human systems could operate in the future. Because in multi-stakeholder collaboration, you're constantly moved between order and chaos. So, and you're that collaboration ecosystem actually develops in the middle between order and chaos. So you actually develop more aliveness and more resilience in a human systems, and that human system is then capable of dealing with challenges in a totally different way.
Collaboration is a result of several things. The thing of living together, mutual respect, reflection, ethics, and disposition to change of opinion and action through reflection. If you live in those conditions, you live in democracy, or what we call democracy, or what is the idea behind the desire of democracy.
Yeah.
And that is collaboration immediately. Desire of living together, mutual respect, ethical disposition, reflection, reflexive conversations, disposition to change opinion and change the way of action, because all those other things are there. If one of these is not there, then you don't have collaboration as a spontaneous result. You will have to try to collaborate, and you will end collaborating if those things happen. If not, you will apply a methodology to obtain a certain result, which will be collaboration, but will have to imply the desire of living together, honesty, mutual respect, disposition to reflection, because we want to live together.
What I discovered is, in addition to these factors, I felt that people start collaborating when they have the feeling it is about making future together. They become more collaborative when they have the feeling we're trying out something new. So people get excited and more collaborative when there's this dynamic of novelty. And I've also discovered that people shift into a collaborative space when they are able to look beyond their limited worldview. So the moment they feel they're operating in a context, suddenly their willingness to find ways together, or their internal attitude shifts, and they become more willing to contribute rather than to be in competition, for example. What would create that bind? What would create that? Because we all live in a very fragmented world that is so complex that people tend to say, I don't care. This is getting too much. I just care for my own little narrow world. What is it that gets people into that space of wanting, you say, live together, or accepting that we are in a space together? Because that for me is a crucial step in a situation of the world at the moment, that acceptance that because we live together anyway, whether sometimes we make a conscious choice, but the world is interconnected, so we can't escape. What helps people to make it more conscious, that choice?
It's not necessarily more conscious. Suppose that we're thrown together here in this room. We do not know what will happen, but we know one thing: if we open a little bit the space for respect for the other, from my own respect for myself, then a whole thing may expand. If I open the space for trying to escape from here with the participation of somebody else, that thing will operate only to the extent that I begin to, and the other begins to respect me and I the other. If that does not happen, we're always on the edge of betraying each other, of abusing each other, of using the others for our benefit. And collaboration will not appear, and that will eventually break down. Now, how long will this last after we collaborate in the way of getting away from this particular situation of being prison? We do not know, but we shall not separate and touch by having done things together in collaboration, accepting each other's legitimacy in the process, feeling that we have been respected. If we feel that we have not been respected, then we shall separate in anger.
So then it's an important word that you used. So the one that you used again is mutual respect, and that goes a long way. And you just said you were giving each other legitimacy.
Because we are this kind of people, or being. We are mammals. We are loving animals. We have theories not to love each other. But if you break those theories, then appear. We see each other, we accept basically. And if there is the opportunity, we do things together. And so this is very interesting. And I'm sure if you look at your work, what you described that you had done in Indonesia, or in Indonesia was, or in
Tunisia.
In Tunisia, you will find that the whole difficulty was breaking the theories that separated them, that denied them. Find the space in which they were willing to initiate respecting each other, accepting each other's presence.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So it was kind of deconstructing a fragmented system, basically defragmenting a system. And the moment people were able to sit in conversations, and again, we had to slowly build a system, like conversations between a few farmers and then farmers association. You could only slowly bring people together because they were not supposed to talk with each other under the rules, under the theories, under the the regulations or the habits, and it's quite an interesting way that you describe it, because that mirrors what is happening. We had to help people live beyond the theory and the regulations and the system as it was stuck and fragmented and legitimized, to not benefit the farmers, or as a matter of fact, not even benefit.
I believe that is interesting, because I imagine that after you broke down those barriers, which were theories and that fragmentation, what appears is the space for people to get together into conversation in a common purpose of creating a world together.
It gives me an interesting, inspiring insight, because I've never looked at although I intuitively work that way, but I've never looked at how the systems that we create, including the theories and the regulations, but there's a lot in terms of planning and regulations, laws, etc., actually legitimize the inhumanness or legitimize the fragmentation. And if you defragment it, then people can meet as people, and the moment people can meet as people, then kind of a different connection happens. It's interesting.
Yeah.
How would you, let's say, if you have to describe to somebody who's hasn't been reading this book, hasn't been dealing, with, a lot of science behind that, and if you now would like to explain the relationship between the living system human being and the vast living system of nature. Of course, I would say we're part of it, but still there's a relationship. So there is a consciousness in a human being about us being, me being me, and me being in relationship to others, and me being in relationship to the nature. And we tend to fragment us from nature, and that causes a lot of trouble in the world. how would you, if you had to explain that to a lay person, the interconnectedness, how would you do that? What makes it up?
Ask her or him to reflect on how does he or she justifies the discrimination.
Was it discrimination of nature?
Whatever discrimination. Because as soon as you begin to look at why do you discriminate, and what makes you to be tranquil with your discriminations, you will find the theory.
Okay.
And as you do that, then you begin to open spaces of reflection, because you will ask, now, how come that I was doing that?
It's because I believe that every person that sees himself separate from nature or separate from our environment that sustains our living, he or she must have learned at a certain moment of his or her living that separating himself or herself from nature or from his environment was a valid thing to do. So I believe that to ask oneself about how is it that I discriminate nature or I discriminate the environment in which I live, that person must be able to find a moment or a person or a degree in his or her living that validated that.
And then a theory was developed, and then there were lots of other theories that also fitted, like we need to have power over nature or whatever, but there's, of course, then a lot of theories developed. Yeah, that's interesting.
And for example, that could work for the farmers that are growing rice, that they needed to grow in their capacity of production. And they validated that it was necessary to put certain chemicals in order to allow that productivity to arise and to make it bigger. And then you have a theory that justified and growth in the harvest that they needed, for example.
Now you may stop a little after the question or go on, but you open a space, which otherwise you have no way. Oh, other circumstances may lead you to do that. How did I do that?
Yeah.
It's a good thing about questions that they actually open mind space.
Yeah, and actually Humberto and Jimena, they have developed in cultural biology, which is the great understanding that it's in that book, that there are two ways in order to enter to a reflective question such like that. One would be curiosity, or other could be pain. And then I leave you, Doc. I gave you the entrance.
This drawing is incomplete because it should have a line which says curiosity, another arrow which says pain, suffering. And it's this encounter of these two that opened the space of reflection and realizing that our human life flows in that, questions for one motive over the other.
It also relates with the fact that we are in a living moving. We move, and at a certain moment, through pain or suffering, we give a step on a side and we look, how is it that I'm living my living in order for me to be experiencing this pain? Or how is it that I'm doing what I'm doing that I'm curious about this other matter? So that's why it's a detention, because it's giving a step back to see my living. How is it that I'm doing what I'm doing?
And that sidestep is very important, by the way, also very, very important in multi-stakeholder collaboration, that you enable people to do the sidesteps. And normally people refuse that because, unless there's a big pain, they wouldn't do the sidestep. And it's quite interesting how you must have had experience also within kind of entrepreneurial companies, how to enable that moment so that you don't have to wait for the pain.
Exactly.
Right? So you probably can notice that the pain would be coming and have the sidestep a little bit earlier before the crisis, because some people just move into the crisis, and only when the crisis is there then they actually take the sidestep, because they're lying sick in bed or something else happens. And that's probably a very crucial faculty I like the idea with the sidestep, to developed the capability to know at what points you pause and sidestep consciously, rather than kind of moving into the crisis or moving into the pain. And because if we develop that not only as an individual capacity, but as a collective capacity, imagine a society that is able to do the sidestep collectively, in terms of reflective conversations, etc., and build it into democratic processes or whatever. I mean, we do have some of it, but it's almost like not very well established or not very well justified, because you pay somebody to think. So if you talk about issues like that, how is it being received in companies, in the world of, in the linear world of KPIs and plans and 5-year plan and profit margins and quarterly reports, etc. Do people get what you're talking about?
Asking us for doing a conference at the end of the year for the people of the company. And we were talking, and in some moment Jimena asked this manager, would you like that we tell you what do we do? Well, you do beautiful things, you speak about love and so on and so forth, but would you like to know what is indeed what we are doing? And she said, oh yes. So we explained this person what we do, and at the end she said, we like people to think and reflect, but not so much. Depends.
So they should think, but not so that it becomes dangerous for the company.
Precisely, and that is always there.
Yeah.
What idea do I have about what is fundamental for the company? That cannot be touched.
Yeah.
And that's why I believe that these past 10 or 15 years have been so cool, because now we find that there are different efforts in trying to break that, to generate that bridge between social responsible projects and organization. Now we find B Corps that are all over the world trying to spread out this message of purpose-driven organization. We have here in Chile a huge ecosystem of social innovation that is trying to move the manner in which organizations or big companies are doing what they do. We have...
Exactly. I do think something is happening in the human evolutionary consciousness. So people are able to deal more with interconnectedness as they experience interconnectedness, even if it's just through the internet. And people are slightly more able, I think, than 10 years ago. Because 10 years ago, when I was talking about multi-stakeholder collaboration and collective leadership, people looked at me like, are you from Mars? But something is happening. I do think that there is an issue around the sense-making of humankind that is more open to shifting the worldview. We still have to deal with the theories, that actually cause people to become inhuman, and the whole systems, the systems that are actually in place for that. But I do think it's a time of hope.